Welcome to True Crime Files Studio, your go-to destination for exploring the darkest and most perplexing criminal cases. Today's episode takes us deep into the heart of San Antonio, Texas, where a respected baker's life was tragically cut short, uncovering a web of lies, deceit, and a scandalous affair that shocked an entire community. Rebecca "Becky" Fredrickson was the heart and soul of San Antonio's local bakery scene. At 31 years old, she was not just another baker, she was a culinary artist whose warmth and talent drew people from all over the city. Becky owned and operated Sweet Treats, a quaint yet immensely popular bakery nestled in the heart of a bustling neighborhood. Her baked goods, particularly her signature chocolate chip cookies and pumpkin spice muffins, were legendary, especially among the younger crowd who couldn't get enough of her trendy creations. Her shop wasn't just a place to grab a snack, it was a community hub where locals gathered to enjoy the warmth of her personality just as much as her pastries. Becky's personal life seemed just as sweet as the treats she baked. She was married to Michael Fredrickson, a 35-year-old financial advisor, and together they appeared to be the picture-perfect couple. After meeting at a friend's wedding, their romance quickly blossomed, leading to a marriage that seemed as solid as it was loving. They settled into a cozy one-story home not far from the bakery, a home filled with love, laughter, and the scent of freshly baked goods. In the eyes of the community, they were the ideal couple, successful, kind, and generous. Becky often donated her delicious cakes and pastries to local schools, charities, and community events, such as the annual San Antonio Christmas Parade. Her generosity only solidified her place as a beloved figure in the neighborhood. However, as the saying goes, not all that glitters is gold. Beneath the surface, Becky's seemingly perfect life was unraveling. For months leading up to her death, Becky couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Michael, once the attentive and loving husband, had become distant, cold even. He began working late, often returning home well after dark, his excuses growing thinner by the day. Becky, who had always dreamed of starting a family, was dealt a harsh blow when she was diagnosed with endometriosis, a condition that severely impacted her ability to conceive. This diagnosis not only shattered her dreams, but also put a significant strain on their marriage, particularly in the bedroom. Yet, despite these challenges, Becky remained hopeful. She threw herself into her work at the bakery, often staying late to perfect new recipes and keep her mind off the troubles at home. In September 2019, as the air began to cool and the leaves started to turn, Becky was preparing for one of the busiest times of the year, the holiday season. Her bakery was known for its elaborate Halloween-themed treats, which always drew a crowd. But even as she focused on her business, the sense of dread gnawed at her. Something was wrong and she could feel it. She tried to talk to Michael about her concerns, but he brushed them off, dismissing her worries as unfounded. This only deepened Becky's anxiety, leaving her to wonder what was really happening in her marriage. Those who knew Becky described her as the epitome of kindness and generosity. She was the type of person who would go out of her way to help a friend or a stranger. Her warm smile was a beacon of light in the lives of everyone she touched. Her death would leave a void in the community, a loss that would be deeply felt by all who knew her. On the morning of September 15, 2019, the city of San Antonio was slowly coming to life. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm glow over the quiet streets, but in one corner of the city, something was terribly wrong. At approximately 7:30 a.m., Becky's lifeless body was discovered in the kitchen of her home. It was a sight that would haunt the small neighborhood for years to come. Karen Simmons, Becky's neighbor and a 56-year-old retired schoolteacher, was the one who made the grim discovery. Concerned when she noticed that sweet treats hadn't opened on time, Karen decided to check on Becky. It was unusual for the bakery to be closed so early. Becky was known for her punctuality, and her shop was usually bustling with customers eager to get their hands on her famous cookies and cakes. Worried, Karen walked the short distance to Becky's home, which was just around the corner from the bakery. When she arrived, she found the front door slightly ajar, a detail that immediately set off alarm bells. Becky was always careful about locking up, especially after a series of break-ins had been reported in the neighborhood earlier that year. Karen hesitated but pushed the door open and called out Becky's name. The silence that greeted her was unnerving. As she stepped inside, she noticed that the house was neat and tidy, except for the kitchen. As Karen entered the kitchen, her heart sank. There, lying on the floor in a pool of blood, was Becky. A rolling pin, something Becky always kept on the kitchen counter, was on the floor beside her, stained with blood. The once warm and welcoming kitchen, the heart of Becky's home, was now a crime scene. Overwhelmed by shock and grief, Karen managed to dial 911, her hands trembling as she gave the dispatcher the address and explained what she had found. She stayed on the line until the police arrived, fighting back tears as she described the horrifying scene. When the police arrived, they found Karen standing outside, visibly shaken and unable to speak. The officers had to help her to a nearby bench to sit down, as the reality of what she had seen began to sink in. The news of Becky's death spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, leaving everyone in a state of disbelief. How could such a kind and gentle woman meet such a violent end? The investigation into Becky's murder was quickly underway, led by Sergeant Maria Diaz, a seasoned 42-year-old veteran of the San Antonio Police Department known for her meticulous attention to detail and compassionate approach, and Officer James O'Neill, a 28-year-old rookie eager to prove himself. As they entered Becky's home, they were struck by the eerie silence that filled the house. The living room was untouched, filled with cozy furniture and framed photos of Becky's wedding day, a stark contrast to the gruesome scene in the kitchen. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and comfort, was now a chilling reminder of the violence that had taken place. Becky's body lay in the center of the room, her blood splattered across the white tile floor. The rolling pin, a symbol of her love for baking, was now a murder weapon. Sergeant Diaz's experience kicked in as she began to assess the situation. The scene indicated a violent struggle. Chairs were knocked over, a mixing bowl had fallen to the floor, and its contents were spilled across the counter. Becky's apron was stained with blood, and her hands bore defensive wounds, suggesting she had fought desperately for her life. As Officer O'Neill took photographs of the scene, Diaz carefully noted every detail. The forensic team arrived soon after, led by Dr. Lillian Pang, a no-nonsense 55-year-old medical examiner with decades of experience. As she examined Becky's body, she noted the multiple blunt force injuries to Becky's head and estimated the time of death to be between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous evening. The brutality of the attack shocked everyone present, even the seasoned investigators who had seen their fair share of crime scenes. As the investigation progressed, the police began to piece together the events leading up to Becky's death. Their first suspect was the person closest to her, her husband, Michael Fredrickson. To the outside world, Michael was a well-respected financial advisor, known for his calm demeanor and professional attitude. But behind closed doors, Michael was far from the perfect husband. Investigators quickly uncovered that Michael had been having an affair with Becky's own mother, Margaret Ruth Breedlove. Ruth, a 48-year-old woman with a charismatic charm and a flirtatious personality, had re-entered Becky's life only a few years earlier after spending decades away. Ruth's arrival had brought more chaos than comfort. and her affair with Michael had driven a wedge between mother and daughter. During his interrogation, Michael initially denied any involvement in Becky's murder. He claimed he had been working late at the office on the night of the murder and had come home to find Becky already dead. However, as detectives pressed him about his affair with Ruth, Michael's calm facade began to crumble. The police had uncovered explicit text messages and photographs that painted a damning picture of the affair. Michael's evasive answers and lack of emotion when discussing Becky's death only added to the detectives' suspicions. The affair between Michael and Ruth provided a strong motive for murder, and detectives were determined to uncover the truth. In a shocking turn of events, Ruth revealed during a follow-up interview that she was pregnant and that Michael was the father. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case and suggested that the affair was far more serious than anyone had realized. With this new information, police decided to re-examine the crime scene. Forensic experts reanalyzed the rolling pin, searching for any traces of DNA or fingerprints that might have been missed during the initial examination. Meanwhile, detectives turned their attention back to Michael Fredrickson. Armed with the knowledge of Ruth's pregnancy, they began to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Becky's murder. They learned that Michael had become increasingly anxious in the weeks before the crime leading up to Becky's murder. He had distanced himself from both his wife and Ruth, becoming more withdrawn and erratic. Colleagues at his office noticed a change in his behavior. Once meticulous and composed, Michael had started making uncharacteristic mistakes at work, which they later attributed to his increasingly distracted state of mind. The police wondered if he knew about Ruth's pregnancy and whether Becky had confronted him with this devastating secret. The investigation took a decisive turn when detectives managed to recover a series of deleted text messages from Michael's phone, thanks to the expertise of digital forensic analysts. These messages provided crucial insight into what had transpired on the night of Becky's death. In the hours leading up to her murder, Becky had discovered the affair and confronted Michael through a series of increasingly heated text exchanges. Becky, heartbroken and angry, sent messages laced with hurt and betrayal, demanding answers. Michael, panicked and desperate, tried to deflect and downplay the situation, but it was clear that Becky wasn't backing down. The argument escalated rapidly, with the final message from Michael ominously suggesting that he was going to end this. This newly uncovered evidence provided the police with the motive they needed to tie Michael directly to Becky's murder. The text messages painted a picture of a man under immense pressure, trapped by his own lies and unable to see a way out. In a moment of panic and desperation, Michael had resorted to violence, believing that eliminating Becky would somehow solve all of his problems. On the evening of September 21, 2019, armed with this damning evidence, police arrived at Michael's home to arrest him. It was just after 8 p.m. when they knocked on the door of the modest house in the quiet San Antonio neighborhood where Michael lived. The tension was palpable as they waited for him to answer. When Michael opened the door, he appeared disheveled and on edge, a far cry from the composed, confident man he once was. The lead detective informed Michael that they needed to talk about new developments in the case. Michael hesitated but ultimately allowed them inside. The detectives wasted no time confronting him with the evidence they had gathered, the recovered text messages, Ruth's pregnancy, and the motive that had emerged from their investigation. As they laid out the details, Michael's calm facade began to crumble. He tried to deny everything at first, claiming the messages were taken out of context and that he and Becky had merely argued, as many couples do. But when the detectives mentioned Ruth's pregnancy, Michael's demeanor changed drastically. The color drained from his face, and he became visibly agitated, pacing the room and avoiding eye contact. Realizing that the police had cornered him, Michael finally broke down. He confessed to the affair and admitted that on the night of Becky's murder, he had lost control. After Becky confronted him about the affair, especially when Ruth cruelly waved her positive pregnancy test in front of her infertile daughter, Michael snapped. In a fit of rage and desperation, he grabbed the rolling pin from the kitchen counter and beat Becky to death. He confessed that, in his twisted state of mind, He believed that killing Becky would somehow free him from the tangled mess he had created, allowing him to start a new life with Ruth and their unborn child. The detectives arrested Michael on the spot, reading him his rights as they placed him in handcuffs. Michael offered no resistance. His head hung low in resignation as they led him out of the house. Neighbors, who had been drawn out of their homes by the commotion, watched in shock as the man they knew as a respected financial advisor was taken away for committing such a brutal crime. The news spread quickly, and soon all of San Antonio was buzzing with the shocking details of the case. Michael Fredrickson's trial began on December 30th, 2019, at the Bexar County Courthouse in San Antonio. The case quickly attracted attention from local and national news outlets, eager to cover every detail of this sensational story involving a successful financial advisor, his wife, and her mother. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Perez Bruto, a seasoned prosecutor known for her no-nonsense approach and her ability to build a compelling case. In the courtroom, Perez Bruto painted a chilling portrait of Michael as a man driven to murder by the pressure of his illicit affair and the impending birth of his mother-in-law's child. She argued that Michael, unable to face the consequences of his actions, brutally killed Becky in a desperate attempt to escape his crumbling life. The prosecution's case was built around the text messages recovered from Michael's phone, Ruth's pregnancy, and Michael's own confession to the police. On the other side, Michael's defense attorney, Mark Caldwell, tried to portray him as a man under extreme emotional distress. Caldwell, known for his ability to sway juries with his empathetic approach, argued that Michael never intended to kill Becky. Instead, he claimed that the crime was a tragic accident, a heated argument that spiraled out of control. Caldwell urged the jury to consider Michael's previously clean record and the immense stress he was under at the time of the murder. Throughout the trial, Becky's family sat in the courtroom, their grief palpable. They listened intently as witnesses took the stand, recounting the events that led up to Becky's death. The emotional toll of the trial was evident on their faces as they struggled to come to terms with the loss of their beloved Becky. After a week of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching a verdict. On January 7, 2020, Michael Fredrickson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a sentence that brought a sense of relief to Becky's family, who felt that justice had finally been served. However, the emotional scars left by the crime would take much longer to heal. The verdict brought some closure to Becky's loved ones, but the shockwaves of the case continued to ripple through the San Antonio community. Michael Fredrickson, once a respected financial advisor, was now a convicted murderer. His life, once filled with promise, was reduced to a series of tragic decisions that led to a horrific end. In the aftermath of the trial, Michael began serving his life sentence at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's William P. Hobby Unit. Behind bars, Michael had plenty of time to reflect on the choices that led him to this point. His reputation in San Antonio was in ruins, and he became a symbol of betrayal and deceit, a cautionary tale of how quickly a life can spiral out of control. Ruth Breedlove, reeling from the revelations that had come to light during the trial, found herself ostracized by the community. The affair with Michael, once a secret passion, was now public knowledge. Ruth moved out of San Antonio, seeking to start over in a new city where no one knew her story. However, the emotional toll of the trial and the loss of her daughter weighed heavily on her. The pregnancy, once a source of excitement, became a painful reminder of the destruction she had helped cause. Ultimately, Ruth decided to give the child up for adoption, believing it was the best way to ensure a better future.